back on January 1st, Michigan's minimum wage rate increased from $9.87 to $10.10. While an increase in minimum wage was welcome, everything is seemingly more expensive these days as the cost of living continues to rise. So can people afford to earn a minimum wage? To help break it all down, we're joined by CEO of the Lee Group, Mark S. Lee. Thanks a lot for coming in this morning, Mark.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Well, you did such a good job last week. We thought we need more information.
Okay.
We're going to do this every Monday. So let's talk about minimum wage and the significance behind it for both the employer and the employee.
Yeah. Minimum wage was basically established years ago to ensure that people got a so-called fair wage. And what's happened is that as the years have progressed, inflation has gone up. The question becomes, is it still beneficial? Is it still necessary? So it started, I remember when minimum wage was $2.65.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not say how old I am, okay? But now I believe it's $7.25 nationally. The question is that enough?
Yeah. You always end up sounding like your father. I remember when I was making $5 an hour minimum wage, my father was like, I remember when that was $3. And so now I'm like, oh, it's up to 10? Wow. But, it gets raised to $10 and automatically everyone says, oh, this is a great thing. People will start earning more money. But are there potential drawbacks and other economic factors?
Absolutely. So let's just get to the chase. So the national minimum wage is $7.25, Michigan's $10. Let me put this in perspective for you. People work 2,080 hours a year. That's how many work hours there are, 40 hours per week, right?
Yep.
So that translates to a single person of less than about $15,000 annualized. The federal poverty line is $14,000. In other words, let me put it in different perspective for you. You're earning just enough money on minimum wage just to cover the poverty. So the impact here is that's not enough money to survive. $10 in Michigan, that's not enough money to survive. So the implications for you as an employee is I need more money to pay my monthly bills. As an employer, you're saying I'm trying to reduce my costs. I'm trying to minimize my costs. So therefore, you have that gap on both sides.
Yeah, there's never a perfect solution.
It's not.
So what kind of industries are affected more by minimum wage hikes than others?
Primarily the service-related industries. So you talk about the hotel chains, people going in to service your rooms. Restaurant industry is another one. Certainly that takes a significant hit. You have a lot of young people from college during the holiday season, right? They take these seasonal jobs, also taking a hit. So primarily those industries are in the service industries are the ones that are taking a significant hit.
Now, how does a raise in minimum wage affect consumer spending? Does it at all? I mean, have we seen a boost since it's went up in Michigan, or are you, like you're saying, is it just people paying their bills, basically?
No, you're not necessarily seeing a significant increase when people raise their minimum wage. That's kind of like smoke and mirrors. When you raise minimum wage, people are first thing they're going to do, Chris, is to do what? They're going to pay their bills. I'll tell you what we've noticed is since the pandemic, when so many people were out of work, there were 20 million people out of work. Now that number's down to, it's like 3.5% unemployment rate nationally. So we're finding more people are going back into the workforce, but they have more money being thrown at them. So therefore the question becomes, is minimum wage really a necessity?
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, is it something we even need anymore, or can we let businesses dictate their own so-called minimum wage?
Technically, it's still needed. It's to protect the worker going into the workforce for the first time. Because think about what I'm going to say here. What I'm going to say is very simply put, if you were not offered minimum wage, they could technically offer you $2 an hour, $4 an hour. So that's why minimum wage is there. So the challenge though is it necessary? Absolutely. Is it going to cost a lot more money for employers to raise minimum wage? Absolutely. But look at the record profits out there. Look at the number of people who are looking for work. Look at the number of jobs out there. If you want to remain competitive, you have to pay a fair wage.
So I think I mentioned this last week on my drive from work. I drive through a couple of fast food restaurants, and there's a sign out front saying we pay $16 an hour, so $6 above minimum wage. In this job climate, how do places recruit for minimum wage jobs?
You can't.
Okay, that's simple.
I mean, you really can't. You don't view it as a minimum wage job. Look at it more than you're paying a fair wage. What other benefits can you offer to that employee? Is there, today's the first day of school, by the way, welcome back to everybody going back to school, but can you offer educational benefits? Can you offer other benefits as opposed to a 5-day work week? Can you offer a 3-day work week, right? So you have to think creatively in terms of just beyond the dollars, offer more benefits. Can you offer health care? to those employees as well. So it's more than just $1. It's more the bigger package.
All right, so minimum wage in Michigan is $10.10. You said nationally it's $7.25, so it varies from state. Now, do the states base this on cost of living in their own state? So, per se, in California, is minimum wage a lot higher?
Yes, the coastal cities are much higher. Typically, the coastal cities are $15 to $16 an hour. The Midwestern states, obviously where we reside, is more middle of the pack. And then the more rural states have lesser minimum wage.
All right, one thing you're interested in, I am too, is AI. Let's talk about AI. How does that impact minimum wage? Or if it hasn't yet, maybe how in 5 years?
You know, we talked about this last week, another interview here at the station, of course. It could impact minimum wage, and it could impact employees. It depends. It's still too early to tell. What I tell people when it comes to AI is you use the technology to leverage your current role and responsibility within the organization and definitely show your value. In terms of long term, it's going to impact minimum wage. It's too early to tell.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot for coming in and discussing these issues. We'll have you back next week. Always appreciate coming in.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.